Winter's coming, folks. Some would argue that it's already here. This is a bit of a seasonal detour I'm calling cosplaying a Canadian, because when most folks think of us Canucks, they think of people wrapped in wool, or ill-tempered grey geese. But mostly wool. For those of us living in the land of ice and snow, beyond the longest undefended well, it's a part of our seasonal landscape. If it's cold, put on a toque. Hands are cold? Wear your mittens. If the phrase idiot strings means anything to you, you might be a Canadian. And I don't use that phrase to be offensive, it's just the one that generations of grandmothers have used to describe those long braided or otherwise knit or woven strings you attach to a child's mitts to keep them from losing them. The ubiquitous they can call it I-cord all they like. Where I grew up, they were idiot strings, mostly because you had to be especially talented to lose a pair of mittens attached in this manner. Anyhow, I have hats. I have mitts. I even have scarves and a cowl. None of them match. None. I'd like to change that, because while I totally lean into the whole aesthetic of mismatched winter woolies, there are times when you might want to match. I mean, there's something to be said for looking vaguely like you've got your shit together. I'm working with a bit of Lion brand Wool Ease Thick and Quick in the colorway Hudson Bay, because my grandmother's had Hudson Bay blankets and I'm a sucker for nostalgic colors. I also have a standard matching white as needed for cuffs, etc. It's chunky yarn, so hopefully this project won't take very long. Anyone who's seen a handful of my videos has probably noticed that I tend to live in hoodies. So I spent the better part of day one just staring at pictures of hoods with cowls attached, or scarves with hoods attached, you know, some sort of hood with scarf/cowl thingamabob. And my reasoning is sound. I don't use the scarves I've made myself because they're just extra bulk. The cowl I made from my own handspun is so limp it looks like it was knit by Dr. Kevorkian. It's a death reference for anybody who doesn't remember anything of the 90s or wasn't alive back then. I have two hats I wear semi-regularly, and by regularly I mean they get taken off the moment I get in the car. I wear my hair in a bun to keep it out of my face, so my neck gets cold and I look like a cone head in almost every hat I wear. The messy bun hats don't help because I don't bother to untie the opening at the top.
It hasn't escaped my notice that if I'm wearing a hoodie under my jacket, I probably would feel weird wearing a hooded cowl. So we're going back to the traditional Canadian winter uniform of toque, neck warmer, and mitts. Enter the 2.5 hours slouchy toque. I can use my non-patterned yarn for the ribbing, and I'll use the striped yarn for the body of the hat. The poof will sit nicely up top like the standard modern toque this is. The problem with Ravelry is it's a multitude of rabbit holes just waiting to be explored. It's the ultimate in knitting sidetracks. Using size 8 needles to cast on and do the ribbing. This section actually went by pretty quickly. As always, the post-it note is right there to remind me to record my rounds. Growing up, there was always a wide variety of toques and mittens to choose from. We moved from the sunny coast of British Columbia to southern Ontario and then eastern Ontario in the early 80s. My grandmother celebrated by making warm woolly items of clothing that, in their time-honored way, kept us warm throughout damp, snowy winters. She often used worsted weight yarn for her projects, but as the beauty gurus would say, I fell in love with the yarn's color story. Attached the striped yarn, and now it's just a few more rounds until it decreases.
This here is a can of worms in action, and I'm showing 3 sets of needles for a reason. When it comes to knitting needles, I tend to subscribe to the adage, you get what you pay for. And I'm paying a premium price for this particular kettle of fish. I generally try not to buy new needles unless I need to, and as a result, there are some older needles in my collection. The wooden needles are just such a pair. I picked them up a few years back when bamboo needles became a big thing, and realized the drag on the yarn slowed me down too much, and was very thankful that I rarely need to use 8mm needles. I keep them mostly because there are some fibers that are very slick and can benefit from being slowed down. I don't knit them often, but it's nice to have those needles in waiting just in case. I also figured that if I needed that size more often, I'd replace them sometime in the future, and that future isn't right now because 2020 has been a serious exercise in budgeting. Which brings me to the second set of needles. These are a plastic pair I picked up when I realized I had absolutely no needles for working on super bulky yarn. They were also super cheap, and it shows. Editing Mare's going to splice in some struggle shots of trying to move the yarn along the needle. It's not pretty. The cable is fine, it's just long enough and pliable enough to let me do my thing, but the needles themselves are a pain to work with. And by the time I got to the decreases on the hat I'm working on, my hands were hurting something fierce. That brings me to the third pair of needles, the Addi Turbos. Addi Turbo needles by Skacel, these guys, are easily one of the best brands of needles if you want to knit for smoothness and speed. I've bought multiple pairs of 2.5mm needles because for socks they're just the cat's arse. Addi Turbos are also one of the more expensive brands of circular needles I've ever purchased. They used to be about $20 Canadian per pair, but I think the price has gone up because these ones cost $29.99. But generally, Addi Turbos are worth the price. There's a caveat to that. They're worth the price as long as they're the tool you need to do the job. The plastic needles hurt my hands, so I went to a local yarn store to pick up the Addis. They're taking what I consider to be reasonable precautions for COVID, limiting the amount of people in the store, limiting their contact with products, etc. Unfortunately, that also means there's a measure of gatekeeping. I came in with the right needle size in mind. I wasn't asked what length of cable I needed. I was asked what I was knitting. The person helped me stop listening after the word hat and told me they had 16-inch needles in stock. Because that's what you knit a hat on. Full stop. I asked if there were any longer cables. I was told that they had a 24-inch cable, but that I needed a 16-inch cable. I countered with the list of other items I needed to knit with those needles and tried to mention that I knit magic loop style. But the very helpful lady barreled ahead with getting me what she felt I needed. They reluctantly sold me the 24-inch needles you see before me, because hats, as we are now very much aware, are only knit on 16-inch needles. Bear in mind, I thought I was upfront with what I needed and was caught flat-footed by someone else assuming they knew better. I'm not always right, so I figured I'd roll with it, and if they didn't work, see if I could exchange them. I briefly tried using these needles before I realized it wasn't going to work. The cable's too thick and too short to do anything more than one round. I called the store and was told that they don't do returns on needles as they're a personal item, but that I could pay another $30 for another set of needles. That would be a total of $60 spent on needles. These 2 pairs of needles and the yarn for the project, together, don't cost half that amount. There was some back and forth where I tried to tell them that had I known there were more than 16 and 24-inch cables in stock, we wouldn't be in this situation, but that those were the options I was given. I was put on the line with the owner, who had helped me earlier that day. It almost feels like I'm outing myself as a Karen, but I really try not to talk to the manager at all costs. I'll spare you the gory details, but what it comes down to is this. Words matter. The person who assisted me assumed 3 things. That I was making a hat, that this was the first hat I'd ever knit, and that I knit the same way she does. There were 2 or 3 other customers outside waiting to be assisted, so she was also in a bit of a rush. I was also the youngest person there, and I'm told I look younger than my age. so it's possible she assumed, again incorrectly, that I'm a new knitter. If I'd been asked how long a cable I needed, I would have said 32 inches or more. Instead, I was asked what I was knitting, and the length of the cable was assumed. I wasn't told what was in stock, just given a very short list of what was assumed to be needed, and therefore what I thought was available. I'm going in tomorrow to return the needles. Apparently they're making an exception for me because I kicked up such a fuss on the phone, but I'm hoping that the store understands why they're making this exception. That yes, times are tough and it's a pain in the arse for both the customer and the staff to have to play guessing games with stock, asking about items like they were options on a fast food menu, without even having a list handy. It's probably a good thing I wasn't doing any sock yarn shopping, because they would have had to have carted up half the store to the front in the wheelbarrow while I tried to decide between the Regia, the Langya Wall, and the Cascade hand paint. And woe betide someone try to decide the color of my dad's Christmas socks, because by the same logic of hats are only knit on 16-inch needles, men only wear brown, gray, and drab blue socks. They'd probably have a heart attack at all the pink in the husband's wardrobe. Like, seriously.
Mission accomplished. One set of needles swapped. The store owner didn't seem too pleased with me. She was surprised that she'd sold me a pair with a 24-inch cable and thought I had a 16-inch cable. It's possible she was going to try to do battle over it again, but instead just asked what length of cable I wanted. So these are 40 inches. And what the heck, Skaisel? Look at how thick that cable is. Seriously, that thing is downright chunky in comparison to other needles, even in your own turbo line. Maybe Skaisel thinks we're just going to knit sweaters with bulky yarn? This is going to make mittens an adventure. We'll finish off the decreases and see about finishing off this project. What is a toque without a pom-pom? I grew up with traditional yarn pom-poms, and I may yet make one from leftover yarn, if there is any. In the meantime, I have a faux fur pom-pom that attaches with an elastic. It really is quite ingenious. Stitch down a medium-sized button on the inside of the hat, then pull the elastic through the closure at the top of the hat. The elastic makes the pom-pom removable so you can toss the hat in the wash if need be. You loop the elastic around the base of the button. I wrapped it twice to make sure it was snug.
It is a cute hat. I do really rather like it. I think I'm gonna get a lot of wear out of this thing. Yep. I have a hat. I rather like it. It's roomy and comfy and slouchy, and the yarn is pretty soft, and they're doing some wonderful things with acrylics these days, though I suspect it's the wool content that's making this yarn easier to work with. It took more than 2.5 hours, though. I mean, between the time spent trying to move stitches on the blue needles versus the time spent waiting to replace the wrong length of replacement needle, it's no wonder I'm not finishing this entire project this week. So cosplaying a Canadian will continue with mittens and a neck warmer, because as the man said, winter is coming. Is it really cosplaying a Canadian if you're actually Canadian? I mean, whatever works, eh? Between you and me and the wall, I am just glad that the snow melted so that we had a little bit of time to actually have a really nice Halloween, because we got to go around to some of the in-laws' neighbors' houses and see their Halloween decorations, and it was really cool. A1. 10 out of 10 would visit again. I'm doing my recording at night because during the daytime it's all crashing and banging from the pet poltergeists. That is to say, the construction crew replacing my siding. Hail sucks. Hail really sucks. This is like the second time in 5 years we've had to replace the siding on the side of the house, as well as the roof. Take my advice, don't buy a house in a hail corridor. Bad idea.